So here's a question. Is it genuinely possible for a leader to pursue radical, deeply principled reform? I'm thinking of federal protection for newly freed citizens after the Civil War, and at the same time, be the ultimate political unifier, someone who can build a winning coalition.
Or does one always come at the expense of the other? Does that pursuit of peace always mean giving up on your core principle?
Exactly.
That tension, that constant agonizing political dilemma is right at the heart of C.W. Goodyear's biography of James A. Garfield.
And he uses this, let's be honest, mostly forgotten president as a kind of blueprint.
The perfect blueprint, really, for exploring the cost and possibilities of compromise in a nation that's just, well, deeply divided.
Now, we're going to go a little deeper than a typical summary today. You're listening to an extended analysis.
Right.
More than just a simple recap. This feature examines how the author shapes his argument, how he builds influence, and how he earns, or sometimes loses, your trust.
Yeah.
It gives you the tools to read with, I think, sharper insight.
It absolutely does.
Should you read this book? This should definitely help. It's also, I think, excellent for aspiring writers.
Oh, for sure. And if you find this expanded format valuable, we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback really does help guide our future content.
And we should probably mention, you're experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation. It's powered by Google's Notebook LM, all designed to give you this deeper, more dynamic kind of book analysis.
So Goodyear isn't just dusting off some historical footnote here.
Not at all. This book came out in 2023, and it's positioned right in the middle of our own contemporary debates about democracy, about governance. So what would you say are his two driving missions?
Okay, so first, he really wants to rehabilitate Garfield's reputation. He makes the case that Garfield was a truly consequential, ideas-driven statesman.
Someone who needs to be pulled out of that minor president category.
Precisely. And second, he wants to show how Garfield's journey, which he subtitles From Radical to Unifier, how that journey just illuminates the incredible difficulty of holding on to your principles when the nation feels like it's about to splinter.
So that tension isn't a flaw, it's the whole point.
It is the key, he argues, to understanding how the American Republic matured. It's a fantastic framing device.
And that's his central rhetorical move, right, from the very beginning. He frames Garfield not just as a man, but as a key character in this huge national drama.
A national drama, yes. So we're not just reading a biography.
No, we're using this so-called forgotten figure as a very specific lens.
A lens to look at the entire evolution of the U.S., through the Civil War, Reconstruction, and then into the Gilded Age. It makes the whole subject feel so much more immediate.
Okay, let's jump into the core of the analysis, starting at the logical argument. The logos. When I first read that subtitle, From Radical to Unifier, I have to admit, the cynic in me thought,
Oh, he sold out.
He sold out. The moment power was on the line, he folded. So how does Goodyear logically argue that that's not what happened?
That is the central challenge he has to overcome, and he does it through a meticulous reconstruction of Garfield's long career in Congress and in the party.
So the proof isn't in one big speech?
No, not at all. It's built on a pattern of concrete political decisions over and over again.
We should probably define what his radicalism looked like first. What were the specific defining issues he was really pushing for?
Early on, he was an ardent abolitionist, and then he became a real champion of radical federal measures during Reconstruction.
We're talking about things like
mandated universal education, federal protection of black citizenship, and critically strong federal enforcement of voting rights in the South. I mean, these were genuinely radical positions inside the Republican Party at that time.
But that's where the political pressure comes in. The book puts him in these impossible decision points. I'm thinking of the Compromise of 1877.
Yeah.
For anyone who might not remember the details, that was the brutal trade-off that, for all intents and purposes, just ended the entire civil rights project of Reconstruction. Am I right?
You are. It was the political deal that settled the disputed 1876 election. It gave Rutherford B. Hayes the presidency, but in exchange, all remaining federal troops were pulled out of the South.
Which meant the end of any real civil rights enforcement.
Guaranteed it. And Goodyear uses moments just like that one, where Garfield actively prioritizes political stability, or party unity, over that radical commitment to justice as the foundation for his core claim.
Which is?
That the man was constantly choosing unity, but always feeling the acute, painful cost of that choice.
That's such a key distinction. It's the difference between, say, an isolated act of cowardice, and a recurring pattern of really painful pragmatism.
That recurring pattern is the proof Goodyear offers.
Okay, but before we can accept his analysis, we have to talk about Goodyear's own credibility, his ethos. He's asking us to fundamentally change how we view a historical figure. How does he prove he's reliable?
Well, the credibility is first established through just sheer conspicuous research. The narrative is so detailed, so granular. But what makes the portrait really feel trustworthy is that he avoids making Garfield into some kind of simple hero.
He uses juxtaposition.
A lot of it. To build this complex, three-dimensional person.
And you see it in these striking contrasts he keeps bringing up. The poverty of his log cabin origins, this canal boy childhood. And then you put that next to his staggering intellectualism. I mean, wait a minute. Did he really publish a new proof of the Pythagorean theorem while he was serving in Congress?
He did.
I feel deeply inadequate right now.
Chuckles. Well, that's the power of the portrait. By showing you a man of such contradictory genius and military success and this humble background, Goodyear establishes himself as a fair interpreter.
Not just someone trying to, canonize the guy.
Exactly. And that complexity makes us trust his take on the political compromises later on.
So then there's the emotional connection, the pathos. I have to imagine writing about the Civil War and an assassination, it kind of lends itself to high drama.
It does, but Goodyear really maximizes these elements. He invites the reader to feel that sense of waste, of what might have been. We read about the trauma of the Civil War battles, then the compressed, tragic presidency, and then, crucially, the agonizing, drawn-out public death after he was shot in 1881.
Which makes you emotionally invested. The tragedy is that his term was cut short right when he was finally starting to implement his big reform agenda. Civil service reform, specifically.
Yes. It turns the entire book into a story about potential denied.
Yeah.
And that structural choice to really backload the assassination narrative is absolutely essential for the emotional and thematic payoff.
That structural choice is so important for the emotional payoff. And if you appreciate how we break down complex arguments and narrative structures like this, we want to invite you to check out Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel. It offers AI, book analysis, summaries, and critiques. It's really designed to inspire reflection and, well, rational thought.
So back to that structure.
Yeah.
Goodyear uses this highly focused, almost novelistic chronological approach. What's the advantage of that? Of always keeping the camera aimed right at Garfield.
The main advantage is that it humanizes a president most people only remember for how he died. We're focused on his personal decisions.
But critics have pointed out that approach has a trade-off. If the focus is too tight on the man, doesn't it sometimes underplay the larger historical context?
It can, yeah. Some reviewers noted that this tight focus can sometimes underplay the broader context of Reconstruction and civil rights. It makes the monumental scale of the political stakes maybe a little less visible, especially for newcomers who aren't already steeped in that period.
So it's a choice. Intimacy over sweeping scope.
Which brings us right back to the subtitle, From Radical to Unifier. It sounds like such a clean, linear transformation.
And it's so important to analyze that subtitle as more of a guiding metaphor than a precise periodization.
So the chapters don't just show a clean shift where he stops being one thing and starts being another?
Not at all. Instead, they constantly stage the tension between those two forces.
So the argument is he was both all at once, just struggling with the contradiction.
His commitment to black citizenship, to education, to institutional reform, that remained a radical commitment. But his political need for unity and for, frankly, not making enemies, especially in the faction-riven Republican Party of the Gilded Age, that forced him into these painful compromises.
That tension is maintained through powerful stylistic contrasts. The author favors these vivid scenes, these character sketches, over just abstract political theory.
Which keeps you engaged.
Yeah.
And you get these incredible contrasts. The radical equal rights advocate who somehow becomes the ultimate compromise presidential nominee.
Right. And that structural choice to accelerate the last part of the book, the nomination, the short administration, the assassination, that shift into a gripping, almost suspenseful narrative has to be deliberate.
Oh, it is. It backloads the emotional payoff. And, more importantly, it lets the author suggest a profound, if tragic, conclusion. If the Gilded Age was defined by political gridlock,
Garfield's martyrdom achieved what his life could not.
his assassination forced the necessary civil service reform. That transition from the patronage system to a merit-based one that all the factional fighting has stalled for decades. The cleanup of politics required a sacrifice.
And that brings us to the modern stakes. Goodyear's whole project seems to be implicitly asking us to apply Garfield's dilemma to our own polarized era.
The book does that through its recurring emphasis on education, intellectual curiosity, and institutional reform. It's implicitly inviting readers to weigh how a leader who fiercely prized both radical justice and pragmatic unity would operate right now.
I mean, if political success today demands rigid ideological purity and party loyalty, where does that leave the simple necessity of governance, of
Yep.
compromise?
It's a real question.
It encourages us to look past simple political labels and really interrogate the hidden cost of political action, and that forces us to confront the ethical core of this entire debate. If the pursuit of unity requires compromising on these radical commitments to justice and equality, say, sacrificing federal protection for voting rights, does that unity ultimately come at too high a cost for the nation's soul? It's a question every civically engaged citizen has to wrestle with.
Absolutely.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary, subscribe, share this analysis with a friend, purchase a book via the link, and think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.